Yes. Hi, everyone. Name is Vinicius. Um, on the whole, yeah, I I have been working. Name is Vinicius. I've been working as a software engineer for I think now it's about 17 years. So it's for like forever. Since I still had to ship code to be actually compatible with IE5. So it's been a while.
Wow.
I know, yeah, exactly. But it's yeah, originally from Brazil. I am living in Sweden for about 10 years or so now. And yeah. And software engineer, have worked in so many different places, Spotify and Klarna, and you know, for in Brazil for like working in the software government level. So Brazil has a digital election. So it's all electronic, all digital since forever. So we like that's kind of like where a lot of my background and care for performance comes from because
Hmm.
it's the kind of like critical software that cannot fail.
Hmm.
And performance is one like big issue, right? Because if you have to work in all kinds of conditions, especially when it comes to software that has to run from in the middle of nowhere,
Hmm.
this kind of stuff is important.
Wow, wow. I didn't realize that. So, and it's very interesting because I remember this one time specifically after I gave a presentation and I mentioned, uh, low powered phones, very sort of like simple devices that people, in North America quite often, and G7 countries have never seen. And someone from Brazil came up to me and basically told me how correct I was, and went through a few examples. And this person's in Toronto, but they told me specifically these are memories that they have of working with
Mm,
very slow devices, et cetera, et cetera. So,
yeah,
that was pretty interesting. So basically, performance for you is almost like baptism by fire. You had
yeah.
to look after it.
Yeah, I come from a place in Brazil that is like central of the country within the country. So most people in Brazil they come from like São Paulo, southeast, the coast, and like places like that where it's densely populated. So in places like that, you have a lot of infrastructure to back. Brazil naturally already takes a lot of time to actually adopt technologies. So
Hmm.
we're always a little bit lagging behind. But where I come from is even more right. So writing software, especially I graduated in university, and I was writing, from the web since pretty much university, and always having to care about every single kilobyte shipped because it takes forever to load a page otherwise. So that and I always been someone who cares a lot about user experience as well. So because of that, I ended up being involved of like as full stack as it gets. So from database design to actually like opening Photoshop, slicing up layers to make websites and things like that. So it's been since pretty much the beginning, but it's like since I joined Klarna, like really like fast forward to when I came to Sweden. Since I joined Klarna, working at a third party, it became very critical to me to care like really resume back to the roots of caring about performance and started doing like internal talks
Yeah.
and some writing some articles and that's kind of how I would say the public facing me caring about performance started showing up.
Nice, nice, nice. And Brazil's, I always want to say, I forget the last letter, but Brazil is part of BRIC, I guess. Brazil, Russia,
Yes,
India. What's the C again?
as China.
China. That's it. Exactly.
Yeah.
So I remember specifically kind of like looking at those countries and how they would operate. And you said,
Yeah.
infrastructure and things like that. Before we get to the meat of the issue, what was it like moving from Brazil to Sweden, where they have like snow, like winter, winter?
Well, it was interesting. I think every Brazilian kind of like is fascinated by the snow because we don't get it in Brazil really.
Yeah.
Like some people, some parts of the south may get like something that resembles like snow, but they don't know where it's snow.
Yeah, yeah, that's amazing. That's
Yeah,
amazing. So now let's get down to it. Again, Speedy Stream's really about the people who work in performance and some of the projects that they're working on. And I know you've been sort of like dabbling, working on some little projects here and there, and we talked about it just most recently. So,
mm,
I definitely want to hand over the keys and let people know let us know what you're up to.
for sure. Yes. So I have never had actually like the title of a performance engineer. Like
Hmm.
unlike many people that are within the circle, I've always cared about performance, but like as part of my like product engineer side of my official title. But since like pretty much like just before I left Spotify, I started trying to push more for like being more involved with the actual performance engineering parts of things. So alongside with like building tooling for performance, like building special integrations with Lighthouse for monitoring performance within the dev and lab environment, writing up about it as well at Spotify. But so I figured I would like to work closely with the tooling side of things, because performance became kind of like a secondary nature for me. Like the primary, of course, was always the product part of the engineering, but then kind of like marrying the both parts, product and performance engineering, kind of became where I felt like I could do lots of work. So that's kind of how a lot of the write up and talks I have is related to product side as well. So like how do you tie in your performance gains to product metrics and ensure that you're working with things that matter for your users and for the products, not just performance for performance sake, like being fast on places that don't matter, for instance.
Yeah.
Um, but my entire journey kind of shaped a lot on how I noticed, like even in big corporations, um, it's a very specific niche, and is a very steep one of that, right? Like performance and I mean, understanding a flame graph, opening dev tools and being comfortable with the amount of information you get inside of the tools. So information for experts, what is information? For non-experts is noise, and it can be a bit you know uh, difficult to break through that barrier, right? So right around the time where I was leaving Spotify, just as I was joining the next thing, which by the time was Volvo, I started dabbling into Chrome source code. So I was interviewing also for Google, and I felt like I needed to get more into the into those woods, and started dabbling into the source code within Chrome, and decided after a year or so, whilst being at Volvo, that I would fork DevTools and create I mean kind of like my vision of how DevTools would look like. So from that, PerfLab was born, and PerfLab was my first, I would say, dab into building dev tools. Something that I was trying to make something that was more accessible.
Hmm.
So PerfLab became that. But then I also realized after a while the PerfLab was more of a dashboard than I wanted it to be initially.
Hmm.
I always had plans to integrate AI, so it was like right at the beginning of the big AI hype cycle. GPT-3 was announced, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna dab into this. Like as an engineer, naturally curious, trying to understand this new technology. So I always had plans to do stuff like that. And after spending a year or so on PerfLab, building and I've extracted the performance panel out of DevTools, and built it as a standalone component because DevTools is already a web component built on top of JavaScript, TypeScript, and lit HTML. So
Hmm.
we extracted that and built PerfLab. And based on the knowledge I had after a while, so now it's like beginning of this year, um, I decided to, dive into the agent thing. So everyone was building their own chatbots, everyone was building agent experience and stuff like that. So I was like, okay, maybe I can do the agent part of PerfLab and try to minimize, even like lower the floor and the barrier to entry. And also because I realized a lot of experiences, agentic experiences, like there's a reason why everyone is building chatbot interfaces, is because it's a very simple interface. It's very inviting, very welcoming. and there's very little information up front, and you can always generate a lot of information as you move forward. So I decided to experiment with that and to build a performance analysis agent, extracting. I already have a fork of tools, so I extracted the performance. Sorry, the trace engine inside of the of DevTools to power this agent, and also extracted a lot of the work around how to handle pieces of information from the trace files into an agent, out of that, to build an agent that understands performance issues.
The trace file and all the information that comes out, like you said earlier, it is a bit of like a fire hose, So I'm very curious how, when you're looking at all that information, what's useful, what's not. Like you talked about the barrier to entry, because we know DevTools quite often enough, it's not that people don't like it, it's just there's too much to process, and they don't know where to start, so they just don't start.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I can share some my screen on.
Absolutely. So you want me to
Let's
pull up what
Yes,
we just, okay, so here we
because
go.
then it's probably easier to visualize.
Yeah.
So this is the first version of Perf Lab. This is its first iteration. So within this is a fork of DevTools. So as you can see, there's the performance panel right up
Mhm,
front. So the idea is that you would load up your traces, kind of like Base Cafe, right? But
mhm.
you would it's more like within your own profile of sorts, and you can also have organizations. Because funny story is that, like, whilst I was doing this, I started interacting with different people within the DevTools team. One of which was Paul Irish, and I was starting to talk to him about like some of my concepts, sharing some ideas. And this is one of the things that I appreciate a lot about the Chrome team, is the openness of how they're very approachable. Like everyone that I approached was always very kind, and managed to share a lot of information and talk about you know ideas, and exchange information. And one of the first things I was planning to do on perflab, was to allow to do trace annotations. So I share like a very early sketch of an idea, of a concept of what I was planning to do. And that's like, because I read an article earlier the year before, or actually later, like it was like early last year-ish, like a year and a half ago. So there was an article like how the Chrome team was planning to fuse Lighthouse with with the performance panel, and like reinvent the performance panel. And I was like, all right, so I'm gonna do like annotations, because people really like to annotate traces. And I was even remembering a photo that Paul himself shared long time ago, and also she reshared on the first perf now, that I was there, and we actually exchanged some conversation there. And it was all about like how the gcreate team like printed out a trace and made annotations on it. And I was like, yeah, no, trace annotations, that sounds like a good idea. And as I started talking about that, Paul was like, oh, funny you mentioned that. And then he started sharing, like he shared with me some of the early plans of doing annotations within the trace panel. And lo and behold, when I pull in the source code and I start reading it, I started getting excited about the annotations and everything that was soon to come. But this first iteration was all about making traces. um First, like, it's still very much like very much important within the first bar of the screen, but like help people understand traces. So within this, the information that I get from the traces, I can generate some different visualizations. Like, this is kind of meant to be some form of like histogram, where I can see thread activity as in activity from an animation frame perspective.
Mhm,
So I can see like where are them some different pain points, because animation frame is present across the entire session.
mhm,
So I can see where different parts of the trace, where I can see where there are most pain points, and I can click and zoom in into different parts, to see how the animation frames are looking like, so I can better visualize the trace file using the power of annotations. So this is native annotations, because once I got access to the trace, to the source code, I could really jump on top of what it was being built already. And then
mhm.
those insights were also like extracted from the trace, based on some heuristics, and also some of, because the trace engine already generates insights for the annotations and for the insights they were generating already, early versions of that. So I also jumped on it. So the whole idea for this, it was to make traces more approachable, and you can click to navigate to different points within the trace, and then I'll generate the annotations that you can see the different parts. Very similar, like soon after the trace, the Google Chrome team shipped their version of this, and it was pretty much the same thing. But then what I realized is that it ended up being a dashboard, and also like could be very frightening, not frightening, but like there is a lot of noise for people that are not experts, right? Like, so if you're expert, you can navigate this and make sense. But then up front, you're met with a lot of information. It's kind of one of the things that I was later on talking with the Chrome team at Perf now last year on, like, what could it be that how can we have the minimal subset of a dev tool to make that the information easily accessible, but also without flooding the landscape with information. Trying to have something that's more progressive. So this is where the agent came to be as a concept. So everyone was building their own chatbot, and then I decided to give it my own shot on building a chatbot that works with performance traces. So the whole idea is to build something that you can upload a trace file. So right away, this is meant to be something that is for everyone. So when you upload a trace file, the agent is going to analyze the trace file and just give you like suggestions of things you can ask, because it's always coming from the point where you're not an expert. So the only immediate dev tool-ish interface I have is something that's tucked away here. So I have like some stats for the trace, the different navigations that might have happened, so you can select and see the different metrics from the navigations, some stats around different important key pieces. So it's still like very much minimal on the amount of information I want to expose right away. So like the different interactions, this is the same kind of histogram concept, but on a different kind of rendering. So it's still from an animation frame perspective, because I feel like it's a much easier way to aggregate metrics and try to have a centralized point of discussion. So still the same idea here, some other basic stats, but still it's not shown right away. So right away, you just met with this, and then you can ask one of the different questions, or you can just ask your own. Let's say, can you help me with my INP score on this trace? And the agent will capture information from the trace and pass through the agent that I have built, and it will start generating a report based on what it sees within your INP score within that trace. So the same kind of things so every trace has screenshots, and so I extract those and generate like an animated WebP, render how the animation looks like within the timeline, like still like just trying to serve fragments of information. And then generate like a minified kind of flame graph here, and also like automated annotations based on what the agent sees. So like trying to like highlight where the longest task is within the flame chart, and of course like very trying to not pinpoint but like direct better where it sees the different problems. So right here, for instance, one of the things that it sees is I have repetitive framework logic. So it sees that this bundle has Next.js pathing. So he's starting to say, okay, you have some framework logic that's very repetitive in the call stack. You might take a look at like a render logic and things like that. So trying to point out how to solve those performance issues. Let me see if this has also LCP problems. It does. So if I can ask like, can you do the same for my LCP metric? So now it's gonna do the same kind of thing, but then for the LCP. But then also one of the things that the agent does is to also give you like what's next, what you can do next, right? Like, so ask for research, or try to investigate all the different paths within the trace. So for the LCP, is the same idea as the NP. It's going to read out from your trace, analyze the network information, and try to give you information around your LCP metric. So first it generates, this visualization on how does the network look like, first party versus third party. So, trying to showcase if you're loading too much third party, how does the network activity looks like from that perspective, give you some different ideas on how to fix stuff. So let's say if the problems of that trace is more like on discovery level, on download, and then lastly, it will show the same kind of network activity but for assets. So trying to visualize how over time, how many assets are you loading, and how much of it different asset type are you loading. So you can also try to optimize. So of course, clearly I'm loading more JavaScript, so try to optimize that for the OCP within the different milestones. And then from here you can also like say, let's say, can you research I cannot type on the points you've presented to me. So, it will do the research as most agents have nowadays. It felt like I had to do my own research because every agent has this. And, it's like we're automating the doing stuff, and as part of any investigation, you always want to do research. So,
And so right now it's doing the research, it's
yeah.
digging around, and because I'm looking at the what it's rendering here.
Yeah, now it's analyzing. So it first come up with a plan, and then it will search the web. For search very specific list of websites that are trusted for
Okay.
performance or development specific stuff, and it will then analyze based on some criteria that it generates on the planning. I can show the planning as well later because I haven't like part of this interface is re-rendering or and resetting the states because I did not want to add too much state. So
Mhm.
I'll wait for it to finish. There you go. So then when it creates the plan, it will just like look for different queries, and then of course like try to tell you why it was looking for. So this all I'm trying to be very much on the side of like a knowledge assistant. So like let's say we're trying to train someone to think about performance, research performance. So that's why within each step is always trying to explain you why it's doing things.
Mhm.
So same for the analysis, trace analysis, what kind of trace analysis is doing. Then, the research they did for the different queries, what kind of results you found. There's like a digest here for the things it did,
Wow.
and a report with each part of the report with the appropriate citations where you can just open up and, go visit the websites and stuff like that.
Here's a quick question. We've always talked about, how DevTools was very much like the fire hose, a lot of data, sometimes too much. They may not understand what's going on. Now, with some of the results as they're being sort of surfaced, is this something that's still developer focused? Like the language is, strictly for developers. Could, someone else come in and say, okay, I understand what's going on here, let me go back to the devs and mention this?
Mhm.
Or are they still going to be like, I'm not sure I get what's going on?
That's a good point. That's a very good point. Maybe not quite, I would say, sanitized
Hmm.
for someone more on a product level. That's a very good point. Like one of the ideas of generating artifacts is that you can copy or download them, for instance.
Okay.
So this kind of came to be because that's kind of how I used to work. I mean,
Hmm.
I still do. But like whenever I'm working focused on performance, what I do is if I'm doing investigations or anything, I'll have like a full report generated within Notion. So I'll go and then normally what I do is I generate a report for devs, snapshots, the trace file, annotations, different slices of the flame graph, explaining what I was looking for, et cetera, et cetera. And then the outcomes and things that I wanted to point out as the actionable things to do. And
Hmm.
also I would generate a sanitized version of that report for product. So like, why are we slow? Like friction points, etc. This is not, I would say, sanitized yet. So it's very
Right.
much developer related. As you can see, I'm talking
Hmm.
about, the very technical
Yep.
points within each one of the reports. But it's a very good point. So I
No,
mean,
and
you can easily generate another artifact that is specifically for like a product TLDR version, sanitized, less technical version of this report for products. And LLMs are great for that. So that's definitely something that can be done quite easily.
I meant to ask simply because, in my history, in my past, and I've seen people just be completely lost. And I remember
Mhm.
once upon a time, I was saying that even at like webpage tests, I was like, listen, I think it would be cool to have something very dumbed down and almost WPT light so that that person who's just like not very technical, but can sort of like manage their way around, some terms and content, might be able to get that sort of like TLDR. It's like, oh,
Mm.
okay, I think I understand where I need to go look now.
Yeah.
And I always thought that was very important, which ultimately, and we're not here to talk about that, but ultimately, that's where I think something like Core Vitals really opened that door. It was
Yeah.
like 3 scores, and it's like, okay, now I know what to think about, right? So,
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, that definitely gives me something to work on.
eh, you know, it,
Generate a separate reports, because then this report is very much developer focused. But then I can use that report as an input or a different workflow to generate the product report.
yeah, like
Sanitized
a
and like key
summary.
points.
Yeah,
Because one of the
exactly,
things that I was
exactly.
planning to do, like that I'm not planning to do, but like something that I always point out is, where does your developer metrics correlate to your product metrics? And so whenever you're pushing for performance in an area of a product, do you know if that's actually pushing your performance, your product metrics? Like, do you know if your conversions is actually going up? Do you know the correlation of things? One of the things that I love on Speed Curve is the fact that they can, like layer on top of your performance metric, your product metrics, such as conversion. And this is to me a big selling point, because if you're not correlating your product with your performance, you're making your website faster, but maybe not in the parts that matter the most.
Absolutely.
So that's the one of the key things that are, like, I always hammer on, is the conversions of the two sides of a product team needs to happen, right? So as a performance engineer, it's something you need to care about as well.
I talk about running and making sure, you work on the part of running that is going to help you be better or faster, and
Exactly.
I'm not going to do arm curls if I'm trying to get faster when I should be, doing like some track workouts, some leg workouts or whatever.
Hmm.
So I
Yeah.
totally get that.
Yeah, I mean, in the
Um,
end, you're not here just to shave kilobytes. You're here to deliver value.
Absolutely, and a good experience,
Yeah, and a good
and
experience. Exactly.
chances are kilobytes might be related to experience, to an
they
extent,
they
but
they will always correlate somehow, but then it's always on like what parts of the product that matter the most, right? Like, so you have the high
absolutely.
friction points, you have your features that are used far more than some other features, so you want to make sure to deliver high impact work, especially when performance is not something that's native to the culture of the company you're working on. You
Mhm.
want to make sure that you maximize, the value of when you're working on performance, especially like some performance problems can be very difficult to work on, and can take a lot of bandwidth. So whenever you work on those, you want to make sure to deliver the biggest value possible.
So where along the sort of cycle is PerfLab right now? Like, are we, near 1.0, or is this really, on its way to 2.0? You tell me.
PerfLab currently is very close to a public release. Right now,
Okay.
I have right here on the landing page. Excuse me. I have the sign up for a waitlist.
Hmm.
I'm slowly giving access to some people because I'm collecting feedback at this point.
Hmm.
But it's very nearing the actual release. So some of the things that is missing is just like, I want to make sure, because I'm using the same system, so not system, but like database, for PerfLab and Perf Agent. I want to make
Hmm.
sure that you can load the traces you've saved on PerfLab, you can load there and analyze through the agent's perspective. Because within PerfLab, I even created like organizations, and you can share traces between people and are within PerfLab and organization.
Hmm.
Like, you can create like an organization, a shared organization level, and stuff like that. So I want to ensure that you can load those traces here, but also chat history, things like that. So those basic things are still not there, because I was focusing very much on like the workflow, how to feed information to the LLM, how to create the better right workflows versus tools. So if you work within AI, you kind of know like where all of those kind of like different branches go. So it was quite of a journey, and it's been quite interesting for me to tap into that side of the engineering world. So it's very close, but it's also going to be open source soon. I'm gonna release it under Apache 2. Most of the code I'm using here is straight up from Chrome DevTools. So this is
Yes.
kind of me bringing to life a vision that I had of something I wanted to have in the world, and I just decided to build myself.
No, I'll be honest, it looks great so far, and
Thank you.
especially in this sort of like current climate where people are really looking to like give me the information that I need right now, which is why
Hmm.
things are going the way they are
Yeah.
in that scene. So, but I've been personally looking forward to this. I remember a couple of years ago, someone had asked me, maybe even three now. They're like, "What about perf and AI?" And I was like,
Yeah,
just kept
exactly. That's
humming and
kind of where
hawing.
I'm
I'm like,
living nowadays.
yeah, I was like, I
and
don't
and
know
now
about that,
I'm even growing because I'm, we can have like a whole podcast session just about this kind of talk conversation, but building this kind of showed me a lot about, informed me better
Mhm,
about some of the paradigms that we might face as engineers in general, building
mhm.
interfaces, and things like that. So now I'm actually getting deeper into browser world. So
Mm.
I was within the dev tools part, and now I'm like going deeper, like an inception moment. We need to go deeper, so I'm going like even deeper into the browser parts, experimenting with that stuff. So it's being like the where does AI converge with different parts of engineering is being very much on the top of my head. I'll tell you this.
No, it's great, it's great. Hey, listen, there are things that I didn't think I'd see happening, and they're happening as we speak. So
Yeah.
it's been a very interesting moment. Now, you said you're going to, so you have a wait list, but because I believe it was like I'd seen perflab.io. Is that correct?
Perflab.io
Oh,
is very, they can use Perflab. So Perflab is
okay.
already available. I would say it's still very much in a beta stage. Like some parts of it, like there are some rough edges, but it's fully available. You can sign up and start using, and upload traces to it and start using it.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Man, fantastic demo. I'm looking forward to seeing how things go in the next, like, say, 6 months. Let me
Yeah,
do this right here. Now, before we close this off, I know that, and I'm going to say congratulations first because I think we talked about this before. But for those that know who don't know, you're going to be speaking over at Perf Now this year.
exactly. I will.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah, yeah. I'll be actually speaking about the journey of how was it to merge performance and AI together. My journey into deep into Chrome DevTools, source code, and trying to build how to feed performance information to LLMs, and how to extract the best value of LLMs when it comes to performance information, how to use them to
Mhm.
as part of your workflow. Not big, I'm gonna be doing like a very much of a deep technical dive, from a developer perspective, from an engineer perspective, but also like what kind of insights you can take from those, and when you are trying to use LLMs to within your performance workflow.
No, it's great. When I saw the list of names and the people who were first announced, I saw that and I was like, this is going to look good. Especially the timing is right. And again, I get back to the idea that I think the way Perf Now. By the way, folks, for those who don't know, we're here talking about Perf Now. So Performance Now is a conference that happens once a year in Amsterdam. It's a web performance focused event. And to my surprise, I remember a few years ago when I first started that sort of like hallway track. um, I realized how many non-engineers were going, and that was a very much an eye opener for me.
Hmm.
And I believe this, Perf Lab in its future versions could be something that they would gravitate to. Especially if it is you have this sort of like TLDR section of it where they're like, okay, I know what my developer just read, and I've been sort of given a summary in my speak, so we can sort of like get along.
Yeah.
Not that you didn't get along, but saying like they could at least understand what needs to be done next, right? So that should be very interesting to see. So I'm looking forward to that presentation, basically saying that I'm going to be there. So in closing, something that I'm going to ask quickly, if people want to get in touch with you, where, when, how, like LinkedIn,
Yeah,
Blue Sky, I don't know.
I'm all over the socials. So LinkedIn, Blue Sky, I'm WebX. I never remember how Blue Sky handles work. Hang on. Um,
It's bizarre.
so yeah, so Blue Sky, I am webx.bluesky.social. So if you look for WebX, you will find me there. And for Twitter, I am at web Twitter, and that's like if I can positively say if you look for Vinicius Dallacqua, you're gonna find me. It's one
Excellent,
of those
excellent.
names that there are not that many of us there.
Hey, I know a little something about that. So that's awesome. Man, thank you very much. That was a fantastic presentation, and I'm
Yeah,
definitely
thank you.
looking
Pleasure.
forward to seeing how things ramp up there. I know you're in Sweden, and this is something that I said like 2 weeks ago or something like that when I was in San Francisco, and I came back and I was like, "Wow, San Francisco is a completely different planet." There was so much AI conversation there
Hmm.
that I came back not thinking but knowing that I'm behind, you know?
Yeah,
And
I can relate.
yeah,
But here in
yeah,
Sweden, Sweden is becoming quite of a center of attention when it comes to AI products.
interesting,
Yeah,
interesting,
we
interesting.
have Sana, Lovable, Paul of the Costa team is here. You have,
Really?
very yeah, you have a lot of it's like, when you mention like, oh yeah, Spotify is from Sweden. A lot of people don't realize that, like we have big tech companies here, and it's kind
Yeah.
of like it's a growing hub.
All right, sir. Well, don't go anywhere, although I'm going to remove you from the stage. But, folks, once again, if you do want to get in touch, look them up on socials. You can go to perflab.io, mess around with this beta version. But at the very least, it is something that you're going to want to look forward to. Hopefully, in the next few months, there'll be a workable version that it'll go public. You can get on the waiting list. And yeah, we'll take it from there. Thank you again for joining. All 60 and change of you that came by, appreciate your time. And I will make the announcement confirming Dan and the Speedy Stream for next Wednesday. And beyond that, if you have any questions, hit me up on socials and we'll see you again soon. Cheers.